July 30th to August 1st in Atlanta in conjunction with the National Forum on Criminal Justice. And next month's webinar will be on May 14th, and that will be Deltec presenting about federal budgets. So, and now I'm going to pass it to Ashwini Jurral.
Thanks, Samantha. Good afternoon, everybody. So on today's webinar, we have Jim Cabral, partner with MTG. He's our panelist. Jim Harris from National Center for State Courts. He will be joining us shortly. And also, I'm Ashwini Jurral, Director of Operations at the IJIS Institute. And what we wanted to do on this webinar was to talk about things around Springboard, because of course we have been talking about Springboard certification program for quite a while, and what we wanted to do in this webinar was to actually show an exemplar of how Springboard certification program is actually working with one of the standards organizations to actually promote the adoption and usage of the e-courts filing standard from OASIS. With this example, we can actually show how Springboard certification provides value to the industry, to the SDOs, and also to the government agencies. The agenda is going to be quick introductions of the panelists. We'll go and do the high-level overview of the Springboard certification program because most of you are aware of what the Springboard certification program is about, so we're going to keep it at high level and focus more on the e-courts filing. And between Jim Cabral and Jim Harris, they're going to talk about the e-courts filing, but also the business case, what it really means to leverage the Springboard certification program for the conformance testing of the specification. And then we'll go into the Q&A. So again, I'm Ashwini Jurral with the IJIS Institute, and our panelists are Jim Cabral from MTG and Jim Harris from National Center for State Courts. So just to give you guys a recap of how we're going to actually manage this webinar is that we'll give you a quick overview of the Springboard certification program, then talk about the background and what the OASIS e-courts filing standard is and what exactly it does for the courts and the other stakeholders who actually share information within the criminal justice and the other entities. Also talk about the e-filing concept, how actually standards can be utilized and how the conformance works. Talk about what it really means to be certified and what agencies and industry can do to leverage the Springboard certification program. And then also talk about how some of the agencies are actually using this standard today in their environment. So Springboard certification program is a certification and an evaluation program. And what we mean by that is that as part of the Springboard certification program, we work with the standards organization to take their specification or standard that has been developed and published and bring to the Springboard certification program to analyze the standard and specification with the feedback from the industry and agencies to build a conformance package so it can actually help industry and agencies to figure out a better way to implement, but also at the same time how to be conformant. And that's where we actually offer the service to analyze the standard, build a conformance package, and offer a test harness and the certification services, which I will touch in a few minutes. But also, above all, the key reason for Springboard certification is, and the value that we offer is that our goal is to help advance the information sharing. Right now, of course, our focus is on the justice and public safety and homeland security communities, but we are in an active dialogue with other stakeholders who are actually information sharing partners with these communities of interest who we do business with, and also where our members are developing solutions and installing them and implementing them in the field by leveraging the open standards. But also, Springboard Conformance certification program provides independent evaluation and certification service for industry and government. We are the neutral venue where anybody can bring their specification to start the initiative and also help develop the conformance package so we can take it to the testing and the certification process. As part of the Springboard certification program, when we talk about the conformance testing, what that means is that we're actually looking at the specification and the standard and looking at in context of implementation and what the core and optional capabilities of those specifications are, and how we can actually take those specifications or the functionalities of those standard and look at developing a conformance package. And then what we can look at is that how we can actually enable a capability where a solution provider can come and look at what the conformance really means, and when they actually implement a specification or a standard with their solution, what the conformance will look like, and then come and actually test with our test environment to ensure that they're conformant to the specification. And as part of that, they can actually get the test report that showcase the conformance level and also provide an opportunity to address any concerns where they are non-conformant and go back and fix those issues based on the results they receive from the test environment. Also, once the testing is completed, we encourage the solution providers or the government agencies to bring their implementation for certification, and that's the key value, is to go through testing and certification process and have an ability to purchase a certification mark license. And what that means is, in order to do that, we encourage each of the entity who's coming through the Springboard testing and certification process to publish their results, so people are aware in the community who has gone through the Springboard certification process, but also what the conformance was about and what the conformance results were. The Springboard certification offers two services. The first one is the test harness service. When we actually develop the conformance package, our goal is to develop a test harness that actually take the specification and then provide the ability for industry and agencies to come and actually have access to the test harness for the implementation of the specification, and we'll talk about that in context of ECF in a few minutes. So that's one service, and the other service is the certification service, where once you have completed the testing and you feel comfortable that you have adopted the specification or a standard in a conformant manner, that now you're ready to come for the certification, and we'll provide the certification and also make the results public on the Springboard certification program website for the public consumption. Now I'm going to turn over to Jim Cabral. He's going to talk about the e-course filing specification from OASIS. Jim?
Thanks, Ashwini. I think many of you guys know me as a longtime member and participant in IJIS, but I'm also, I wear another hat. I'm also one of the co-chairs of the OASIS Legal XML Electronic Court Filing Technical Committee that developed the specification. My other co-chair is our co-presenter, Jim Harris. So I'll be speaking, giving you this overview of ECF, and then he'll be speaking a little later about some of the business case for this. So next slide, please. So within OASIS and Legal XML, we develop standards. And whenever you are developing open standards, you really need a broad community to be involved. And we certainly have that with ECF. So obviously IJIS is participating, but other important partners are the National Center for State Courts, NACOM, in fact, and the Bureau of Justice Assistance, and obviously the NEAM community is very important. And we've had participation in the past from the American Bar Association and other organizations like that. So it really takes a group that represents all the stakeholders in order to be able to develop a standard as complex as the ECF specification. And so, you know, you can probably find yourself somewhere in this picture here, and understand your role in developing and implementing standards. Next slide, please. So I want to give you just a brief overview of the electronic court filing architecture. And when you see the architecture, you understand why it's really important for us to have a certification and conformance testing framework like Springboard provides. One approach that we've taken from the very beginning in developing the ECF standard is to have this idea of modularity in our specification. So we have a core specification, but we have a number of service interaction profiles that we define. Those are the way that the messages that are defined in the core are actually transmitted over the wire or via some sort of portable media. But then we also have needs for things like document signatures, and there's a variety of different ways that those can be applied. And then we have a lot of differences in the way different courts are organized and their policies around how to file and who can file and when they can file. And so we really had to break those up into a set of modular specifications that it's up to each implementer to compose into their particular implementation. And one of the ways we do that is this concept of major design elements. The architecture actually supports a number of different components that all participate collaboratively in the electronic filing architecture system to provide those services. And it's very important to have interoperability between those. So next slide, please. So this gives you an overview of an electronic filing system. You'll see the filer represented on the left side and the two major sets of operations and services that an e-filing system provides. There's actually the electronic filing services, which is what a filer uses to transmit their document and information to the court for review by the clerk and acceptance into the court record. But then there's also electronic service, which is how a filer can transmit those same documents to other participants in the court cases. And so the filing assembly, filing review, and court record and service pieces are what we call our major design elements in the composing of a electronic court filing architecture. Next slide, please. So this just shows you some of the operations that are defined between the MDEs that make up an ECF system. The ones in bold are the ones that are required in order to conform with the specification. The ones that are not in bold are optional, but we found that many implementers choose not just to implement the required ones, but a lot of the optional ones as well in order to provide a complete e-filing system. An important point to understand here is that with all this variety of systems that are involved, each one of these components could be provided by different solutions providers or custom developed by a court and provided themselves. So to get interoperability, we do need to make sure that everyone is building to the same blueprints and that they have interoperable services between the major design elements. Next slide. So this is a high-level view of what a real-world architecture might look like. And on the left side, you see the court systems. You can imagine this maybe in a state where each of the trial courts and each of the counties have their own case and document management system. And then there may be one or more electronic filing managers. The state may have standardized on a common electronic filing manager for the state that provides the filing and review and court record major design elements. Or there could be a number of different EFMs provided by different providers in the state. Either way, the ECF architecture is designed to scale to support those kinds of those designs. On the left side, you see the participants in an e-filing system, the attorneys, the self-represented litigants, law firms, etc. And they each choose an appropriate what we call electronic filing service provider for packaging and submitting their filings into the court, into the EFM. And in some cases, that might be provided through the Criminal Justice Information Sharing System. In some cases, that might be provided through some sort of self-help portal that a lot of states and local jurisdictions have stood up to support the filers. So ECF really does need to be pretty scalable to support all of the different permutations and combinations that you'll see in real-world courts. Next slide, please. So if we look at the benefits of Springboard, you know, we're going to show some examples of what the testing process generates and what you actually see by running your implementation through the Springboard testing framework. And I think Jim Harris is going to join us a little later to talk about, from a business perspective, what that really means. But so next slide. So yeah, I've spoken to this. Let's go on. So if you look at the way Springboard is actually organized, it uses a tool called SoapUI, which is an open, commonly used testing tool, especially in the web services arenas. And what they've done in Springboard is actually taken the requirements for each of those major design elements and the specific operations that each of those need to support. And they've built those as packages in Springboard. So there are performance tests for the core specification. There's performance tests for specifically the web services, service interaction profiles, and all those are combined into a common set of tests that you can run on the variety of case types and operations that ECF can support, both required and optional operations. So when you run those through the Springboard conformance packages, using the SoapUI tool, you'll generate a number of reports that will identify areas that you conform, and then it'll also help you identify areas where you may not conform to the letter of the specification, and give you an idea of where to go and fix something, and you can easily rerun the test and hopefully be successful the next time. Next slide. So this is one example of a conformance report that you receive out of Springboard when you run the ECF test. You'll see that the test case is listed here, and you know, generally green is good. So you'll see that we have 6 tests run, and it'll list the specific tests and assertions that are executed as part of that testing process. So I think this continues on the next slide. So here we are. We have 4 tests that were run and 0 failed. So success. This is what we want to see. This is not generally what you see all the time, though, and this is really what that's really what the value of the Springboard test come in, is that it gives you this independent view, this independent assertion of whether you're conforming to the letter of the specification or not. And it's not unusual to get some failures the first few times that you run the conformance test, and then have an opportunity to go and rerun those tests. The way they've structured the Springboard licensing, you can easily simply license it just for self-testing initially, and get very comfortable with how your solution is conforming to the standard and performing against the test before you actually decide to go and pay for the independent certification that IJIS provides to Springboard. Next slide. So where this really pays off is by providing a common set of tests that all implementers of ECF can run. It really drives down the cost and development and integration and testing for everybody. And we've already learned some things in our first couple run-throughs of the Springboard test, and in many cases they've made changes to the actual implementation of ECF. In some cases, they've actually learned some things about some of the Springboard tests, and they've gone and updated those tests. But at the end of the day, we're now developing a fairly mature test framework that can be applied to a variety of implementations and really speed up implementations and drive down the costs. It's designed for an agile and test-driven development type of world, which of course is where most of us are now. But it certainly could be applied in more of a traditional waterfall type of approach as well, as a gateway test. The advantage to implementers is you have something that you can hang your hat on when you claim to conform with the standard. And we've got a number of implementations out there of electronic filing that claim to conform to ECF, but it's only when they actually run it through some sort of independent testing like this that they actually have something to back that up. And I think even the people that felt very comfortable that they conformed, when they run these tests the first time, they often identify some areas where they still could have some improvement. So that's really a competitive advantage. And the ECF testing framework is available. It says for IJIS members, but it's really available for everybody. So IJIS members can participate, but it can be licensed to non-IJIS members as well. Next slide, please. Okay. Has Jim Harris joined us? Okay. Well, I guess I will keep speaking to the next 2 slides, and hopefully Jim Harris will be able to join us here shortly. If you look across the country, you will see that ECF really has become fairly popular.
Hey, Jim. Hey, sorry about that. My mic wasn't working.
There you go.
Thank you for kicking that off, though. I was just going to actually share a few slides and thoughts on why the ECF standards and certification are important, not only to the courts, but also to implementers and solution providers who are developing e-filing systems, or even developing systems that could support submission of filings to a court. So as Jim said, we start with this graphic showing states that have actually already adopted ECF for their e-filing systems, and in some cases states where there are at least some local jurisdictions, usually large jurisdictions, that have adopted ECF. I think there's actually a few more even beyond what's shown here, but the key point is that there's pretty broad adoption at this point. And just about every RFP coming out in recent years with a scope that includes e-filing requires a conformance with the ECF standard. So that's the key point there. Next slide, please. So on this slide, it kind of shows all the different justice partners that might be involved, have interactions with the courts. Traditionally, when we've talked about e-filing, the focus is more on civil filings and the interface for attorneys, but the scope of ECF goes way beyond just civil. It encompasses really all case types and all the complexities and stakeholders that come with those case types. So what we're talking about here is just about every aspect of integrated justice that you can imagine, not only courts and attorneys, but law enforcement, corrections, prosecutors, even third parties such as drug testing facilities, even pro se litigants and self-help organizations that might have systems that help those self-represented individuals. So the list goes on, and they all have interactions with the courts that can be supported by systems that leverage the ECF standard. So, so the scope of this thing is pretty broad. Next slide. Another slide here about ECF is not just for the courts, but another important consideration is the fact that ECF is based on NEAM. So I'm imagining most of you are quite familiar with NEAM, and many justice partners who interact with the courts are implementing NEAM-based exchanges already. So ECF isn't really a heavy lift for many of them, to pick up on the standards. So, and basically it supports an architecture that builds on a common standard that's already being used for exchanges. On this slide, we talk about a few different things. One, the plug-compatible gateway idea. Basically, it's a standardized interface that eliminates the need for what traditionally has been customized interfaces between systems in the justice environment. Then there's the e-filing service providers. These are basically third parties, as Jim mentioned earlier, that offer services to individual filers, law firms, and other agencies, excuse me, kind of those third parties who offer value-add services, maybe on top of other services they already provide to these folks. So that interface from all of those different service providers is standardized through ECF. It can also be used by partner applications. By that I mean it's not just a user interface, but it includes support for system-to-system communications to submit filings to the court. So just imagining, you have other agencies who are constantly submitting things to the court. Law firms have their own systems that could be enhanced to submit their filings electronically rather than by hand or through a web interface. Booking systems, for example, could transmit their data through this ECF interface into the court system. So it's a pretty broad spectrum that we're talking about here, and a couple of examples are shown on this slide. Utah is actually submitting their criminal filings through their e-filing system, and the LA County example. The next slide kind of illustrates that even further using the architecture diagram or example that Jim mentioned earlier. It just makes that point further that ECF isn't really just for courts. It's basically if you're one of the agencies on this slide or a provider of services or solutions to one of those agencies, then you should be thinking about ECF because that's the standardized interface to the courts regardless of what agency we're talking about here. And on the next slide, illustrates the point even further, perhaps with some examples of scenarios that might result in filings from various agencies or other entities into the courts. And you can see from these examples, some of these are actually or could be third parties that are contracted with those agencies that are responsible for the corresponding service. So the ECF interface is not only supporting those agencies, but it might be supported by those solution providers that provide the systems to those agencies. So as members in the vendor community, members of IJIS, that's an important piece of the puzzle here, and helps us to begin to understand why ECF is important really to any solution provider in the justice community. So to kind of wrap this part of it up, there's a myriad of opportunities to leverage the standards. It's now mandated in nearly all e-filing RFPs, which means has a impact on other systems that interact with those e-filing systems. And consequently, the adoption is now pretty wide, and there's been a recent surge in vendor adoption. So, with this broad adoption, there's a desire to validate and certify that solutions are indeed compliant with the specification, and that's where Springboard comes in. So hopefully that lays the groundwork a little bit anyway as to the significance and the broad impact that the ECF standards can have. So I think that segues into a little bit more on the Springboard side of things.
Thanks, Jim. So before we go into the why Springboard certification matter, or why certification matters at all from the standards conformance perspective, one of the things which I want to talk to you about was on e-course filing, we have actually gone through a process where one of the agencies have adopted the e-course filing in their implementation. And so that's Georgia Administrative Office of Courts. They actually took the OASIS e-course filing and implemented that, and then came to the Springboard certification. And when Jim Cabral was talking about the major design elements that are part of the e-course filing specification, what Georgia AOC did was they actually came to the Springboard testing first, made sure that the conformance on the adoption of the specification was validated. They got the results, and then they went through the certification process where they were issued the certification of conformance to one part of the major design element, which was around the filing assembly, which is one of the major design elements of the overall ECF, and showed the conformance. And that's actually published and posted on the Springboard website, so you can see that what exactly the Georgia AOC actually tested for conformance and got the certification for. So that was one of the first use case of leveraging the Springboard testing and the certification process for the e-course filing. So now that brings it back to the why certification matter. If we look historically, that we have a lot of examples, but we are showcasing one of the examples that we know of that in simple terms it changes everything. When you go and use standards and actually are conformant to the standards and go through the certification process, that it helps actually motivate the industry and the government agencies. And the example here that we are showcasing is that automatic fingerprint identification system and live scan were actually published in 1995. That's a capability that came out. At that point, we had very few providers who were actually serving that market, and it was costly to implement. Then in 1997, 2 years later, there was a standard that was developed, which was called Electronic Fingerprint Transmission Standard, also known as EFTS. And then FBI, as part of that, stood up the certification program. As a result, what happened was that once the standard was published, now we had new solution providers looking into getting into this market by adopting the standard. But also at the same time, the existing solution provider went and to have the market share and make sure that the implementation was easier and cost-effective. They also adopted this standard, and as a result, between 1995 to 2012, we have gone from almost 3 providers, or plus 2, to now a total of 8 in that live scan provider area. So that showcased that why standards are important, and once you have the certification, it also results in the low cost of implementation that's demonstrated with this example in the criminal justice field. But also at the same time, that's the thought process we have for the Springboard program, that as we move forward, that it can help simplify the implementation, but also at the same time help the solution providers to have the low cost of delivery to their clients, the government agencies, and also give them the edge and the competitive advantage, which Jim Cabral and Jim Harris talked about, by adopting the specification. But at the same time, by adopting the standard, it helps you avoid developing new standards or having lack of guidance how to implement certain things and certain capabilities. But also, when people are making claims that they're conformant or compliant to any standard, now venue like Springboard can actually provide you a place where people can actually come and vet the claims that are being made on the conformance against certain specification if they have gone through the Springboard process. But also, it helps better understand how to take a standard when it's developed to the implementation stages. Also, creating a feedback loop to the authoritative bodies like the standards organization, what the lessons learned are, so they can help enhance the standards capability. But at the same time, this also helps drive some of the procurement discussion, how to actually put the guidance out there for the industry and the government agencies, how to adopt these standards. When people are asking in their RFPs or in the grant language, you need to be conformant to these specifications, what that really means. So it's really important that there's certain guidance out there from procurement perspective, and also the training aspect to raise the awareness. And that's why we believe that what we are demonstrating here with the e-course filing and through the Springboard program, that Springboard program has demonstrated that it can help achieve that. But also at the same time, what we're saying is that with e-course filing, as it moves forward, we have a lot of other initiatives that we have in the pipeline that we'll be putting in motion right now with industry, government, and SDOs to use the lessons learned and leverage the expertise that we have built over the last few years around Springboard to enhance the adoption and use of those standards. So as such, if anybody wants to get involved in the Springboard testing and certification process, of course, you can go to our website, and we have a link to the Springboard program there to better understand what Springboard certification program is about, but also what kind of services we offer. But as part of that, you can contact any one of us at the IJIS Institute and me. And now we also have Alyssa Jones, who has joined our team to manage the Springboard program. She'll be leading that. So you can contact us anytime to ask about the question in the Springboard certification program. As part of that, what we have also learned is that in order to actually increase the knowledge in the market space around certain aspects of the standards and specification, that it's really important that Springboard program provides a venue to assess readiness. Readiness on the adoption of the standard and specification, but also at the same time, readiness for the solution providers and the government agencies on what it really means to adopt the standard, what they really need to have in place to adopt the standard, and Springboard can help provide that guidance, and also help conduct the walkthrough, what it really means, what kind of engineering aspect is involved from the software perspective that needs to be engineered or re-engineered to be conformant to the specification. What it means when you are in the test environment and now you have to go and implement into the production environment. It actually gives you a lack of words, a playground to play in the test environment to see how the standards behave when you actually implement the standard with your solution. And also, we talk about conformance, and that's a critical aspect of it, that we want to make sure that based on your needs, based on your solution, you might have a different need to adopt a specification, because every specification have different aspects with their core capabilities and the optional, that what it really means, what you will be adopting, that Springboard can offer that service and assistance to help adopt the specification with your solution based on your needs. And within the test environment, you can then come and test it. And then last, the key thing here is that getting the certification, which can provide the competitive edge and niche to the solution providers, but also build confidence in the market that, yes, standard does work. Now we have reference implementations which people can look for, how the standard behaves when it's implemented, and also what are the best practices and lessons learned. And as such, it leads to the certification, and then from procurement perspective, that it's actually when somebody is asking to say, hey, we want you to be conformant and certified, what that really means, we can provide that venue through Springboard to offer those services. So to wrap up, that's what we have done so far from e-course filing as an exemplar for Springboard testing and certification program. We are actively engaged in a government agency and a solution provider or solution providers to implement and adopt the e-course filing specification, and they will be coming through for the certification program. Also, one of the big things we are learning through the e-course filing, and also going back to our very first Springboard initiative on the prescription drug monitoring and the victim notification, that people, when they start looking at the specification, if they're not engaged in the development of the specification, they have a lot of questions. They want to understand what this really means from specification perspective, what functionality the specification offers. So what we are working on with the authoritative bodies, in this case like OASIS Technical Committee for e-course filing, to develop some FAQs that we can post in context of e-course filing for Springboard certification program. So we have a placeholder where people can go and learn on their own before they make a commitment on testing and certification, what it really takes to actually adopt this specification. So we'll be actually putting FAQs around ECF on the Springboard website too. So we're going to stop here and open it for the questions.
And so if you have a question, you can type it into the question box in the little control panel over to the right. We'll give folks a few moments to type in questions, and then we'll go from there. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions so far. Okay, it doesn't appear as though we're going to get any questions.
So again, if you don't have any questions now, but if you have any questions later on to understand the Springboard testing and certification program, but also at the same time to learn more about ECF, feel free to contact us, and we'll see you all on the next webinar, and have a good day.